everybody. All right, we're going to get started right away into REN Chapter 3. It's been a minute since I've done the second one. It's been about a week, actually. And so we're just going to get started right now. Let's go. Get myself together here. Get your shit together. Don't take no shit from anybody. All right, here we go. Stop farting around. Let's go. Nobody cares about your hair. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows. She's a bass.
My therapist was scowling at my weekly anxiety and depression scores like a detective trying to crack a particularly stubborn case. There were no signs of improvement, and the scores followed no real measurable pattern that were consistent with bipolar. After nearly 2 years of talk therapy and taking enough medications to fill a pharmacy, he sat down with me and he dropped the bombshell that he didn't think that I had bipolar. In fact, he said that he didn't think that I had depression at all. And it was a very odd thing to be stripped of an identity in an instant. The reality was that a 20-minute in and out consultation 2 years ago led to 2 years of swallowing pills that I never needed and devoting so much of my time to managing the condition that I never actually had. The emotions inside me swirled around like a mismatched soup. On one hand, I was full of anger and I was bitter about the whole situation, but I was also hopeful that this new path could offer me the relief that I desperately needed. He told me he was going to refer me to an ME clinic in Bath. I'd never heard of it before, but instinctively true to character, I started researching it online as soon as I got home. Apparently, ME is the medical equivalent of a choose-your-own-adventure book, with tiredness as the only consistent plotline. There were no universally accepted reasons as to why the fuck it existed in the first place. It seemed it was largely accepted to be a post-viral condition, but that was all speculative because there were no clear consensus in the medical community what ME even was. The defining characteristic was a tiredness that wouldn't go away with rest. I could relate to this. In fact, I could more than relate to it.
Okay. After a one-page questionnaire and like a 30-minute consultation, after being on a 6-month waiting list, to be told from that 30-minute visit with a one-page questionnaire that he has bipolar, then him doing the research and him not feeling like that was what fit him, but yet delving into it anyway and trusting the medical professional and the medications, the therapy, the guidance, the support groups. And by the way, I'm just sorry, this is just my routine with the pain in my hands. This is not an advertisement for gels or creams or copper gloves. This is just what I have to do. But anyway, so after having, how long did he say? Did he say a year? Okay, yeah, so after 2 years of talk therapy and enough medications to fill a pharmacy, then he's being referred to an ME clinic in Bath, and it's hard to say Bath, in hopes of maybe finding out what the underlying reason for his unrelenting tiredness is. And you know, ME is ultimately a diagnosis of exclusion. There are so many things in the medical realm of diagnoses that can cause unrelenting fatigue, chronic fatigue, just fatigue that doesn't improve after rest, for anywhere from sleep apnea to depression to anemia. There's just a whole host of medical conditions, and ME should be after everything else is exhausted, basically. So I don't know if he's leaving out some information from one to the other, because obviously a lot of things happened in 2 years' time. He did his due diligence with therapy, obviously. He did his due diligence with his own research, trying to find not only the medically recommended therapies, but also homeopathic therapies, anything that he could do to try to cure himself, if you will. because as he described, he's just trapped. He's trapped in a body, in a shell of he didn't even recognize who he was anymore. So now we go down the ME path in Both. Let's see what happens here.
For anyone lucky enough to have not have experienced this, if you want an idea of what it's like, force yourself to stay awake for 3 nights in a row. During this time, eat the food that makes you feel terrible, and in this sleep-deprived state, exercise until your muscles give out. By the 3rd day, you'll have a small insight into living with this condition. During the years post-stem cell transplant, where I recovered a lot of my health and functionality, I remember getting COVID and thinking it was a walk in the park compared to the first year of my illness. The difference was COVID lasted about a week. The thick of my illness lasted 8 years, and it only was getting worse. I pinned a lot of hope on going to that first visit at the ME clinic. It was a 6-month waiting list, God bless NHS wait times, but I felt excited to be surrounded by people who would understand me, where I could climb out of this nightmare. But my hopes were pretty quickly crushed during that first visit. I remember walking into a space that looked like a disused classroom where a bunch of people on chairs were sitting around in circles like Alcoholics Anonymous. I could feel a sense of camaraderie and that we all felt like dog shit. We were all confused and we were all desperately wanting to feel better. I believe at the time I was probably the youngest in the group. The group leader waddled in and handed us all a booklet that looked like a school timetable. She then sat us down and told about this new revolutionary technique called pacing, where you write down and track everything that you do in a day, and then you do it less. And then with time, do it more again. The theory being that you have a limited bucket of energy compared to normal people, and you need to protect that and gradually push it. I thought this sounded pretty stupid, so I raised my hand. I told her about the pain in my body. I told her that my muscles twitched constantly. I told her that my bones ached. I told her that my mouth was dry. I couldn't focus. That some days they'd be without mercy and I'd be trapped in bed for the whole day. But the days that I wasn't, I wanted to make the most of it. I wanted to breathe the air and I wanted to live. She told me she understood it's hard, but she didn't really offer more than that. She just pointed at the booklet and told me to follow it. I asked her about things like heavy metal poisoning, about chronically reactivating viruses, about defective mitochondria, about all the things that I read that were linked to chronic fatigue, but she just raised an eyebrow, looked at me like I was a hypochondriac and told me she knew nothing about those things. I remember walking out of the building feeling disheartened and defeated, so much so that my legs buckled as I was walking home. I began to sob uncontrollably on the side of the road. An old woman knelt down to comfort me and asked me what was wrong. I didn't even really know how to explain, so I just told her that I missed my friend.
Oh. Man. Again, like I was saying in the last section there, just a shell of yourself. I mean, you're stuck in this body with this brain is one way and your body is another way. And he mentioned before the cognitive dissonance, where what he was feeling in his body and what he was being told into his brain about the bipolar, those two didn't match, and so he was struggling with what's the truth here. And the same thing here. It's, I have to look up what pacing is. I'm not familiar with what pacing is, so let's look that up. Okay, so I'm just going over, this is just the good old AI overview on my iPhone, which you never trust what that says. I need to go into an actual article about it. But just to get at the overview, though, it's a little bit like the spoon theory, just in a quick glance. And so it's talking about the pacing being this self-management strategy, learning to balance activity and rest to achieve increased function and participation in meaningful activities. And the goal of it is to preserve energy, increase conditioning and stamina, and avoid symptom flares. And it talks about the fact that it is beneficial in such as ME, CFS, and fibro, long COVID, other conditions including cancer, HIV, persistent pain, COPD, and heart disease. And so examples of pacing strategies, as Ren had already delved into a little bit there, was an activity diary, keeping track of activities, rest periods, and how they impact your symptoms, graded exercise programs, starting with low intensity activities and gradually increase them over time. And that's something that, as a Dr. counseling my patients who wanted to lose some weight, you always start with low intensity, low time involved, because what you don't want is you don't want to make a big goal at the beginning and then you can't meet that goal and then you're aggravated and frustrated and then you just quit. So always start low and then move up slow from there. And then taking breaks and rest periods, incorporating short breaks throughout the day, especially during mentally or physically demanding tasks. Prioritization and planning, this is what makes me think of the spoon theory. Prioritize essential activities and plan your day to avoid overexertion. Don't use too many of your spoons. Don't overextend your spoon allowance. And then energy conservation techniques, use strategies like minimizing physical exertion, reducing mental stress, and optimizing sleep to conserve energy. Anyway, so that's pacing until he had just mentioned it. I don't know that that's a term that I was familiar with. Anyway, but I mean, good for him for raising his hand in his first session there and asking the questions. I mean, again, I've said it's over and over again already. You are your own best advocate. Ask the questions. Come armed with the knowledge. Do the searching. Do the research. Dr. Google is fine to get yourself armed with information, and then take that information to the professionals who are then should be able to help you and answer your questions. Now, this happened to be misguided because this person was clearly not the person who was equipped to handle his questions, to modify any of his therapies or treatments or diagnoses or any of that stuff. But he clearly had done his due diligence and his homework. So please don't let that message slip by you if you are someone in a similar situation. If you're finding these videos because you connect to REN's story, let this be one of the biggest take-home points. Research for yourself, arm yourself, go in with the information to the medical professionals or whomever it may be, and as a team, you and your healthcare team, then you can move forward hopefully in a way that's productive and get you somewhere, you know? It breaks my heart for him that he had to go through such mental gymnastics, trials, tribulations, heartbreak, heartache, physical pain. There just aren't words to describe what all he went through, and yet he still had the drive to continue and not give up. Yet you can only handle so much, and then you have a breakdown, and then sometimes you just need a little help. You need to reach out to somebody, and somebody needs to just sometimes give you a big mama bear hug. So
despite my skepticism, I stuck to the program for at least half a year, and I kept going for my periodic visits to the clinic, and it did jack shit. In fact, I got worse. I was always getting worse. One thing that particularly struck me about the ME support groups was the pure desperation and confusion. With most other conditions, you're given a diagnosis, a prognosis of whether it's going to kill you, and what you can do to manage it or cure it. With ME, you don't get that. You get an indeterminately long sentence to purgatory. You feel worse than you've ever felt in your whole life, and you're given no explanation as to why, and no signpost pointing the way out. There was no selection bias to the people suffering. Members of the group were anything from esteemed ex-lawyers to single parents to former athletes. One thing I can say, these people were for the most part all extremely driven and collectively mourning their old lives. There's a stigma that because ME's predominant presentation of symptoms is tiredness, that its victims are just being lazy. I can tell you firsthand that me and every single person I've met with genuine ME would rather run 1,000 marathons than have to live another week with the tiredness and the unrelenting fatigue. We were at war with our tiredness, trying desperately to escape it, and some of us would go to extreme lengths to turn ourselves into guinea pigs to try and find ways out. Suicide was pretty common in those online support groups. It was around this time I was swallowed into the music industry. I was out busking on the streets one day and I noticed this sketchy, good-looking Mauritian guy with his arms crossed watching me, really intensely, as though he was studying every lyric coming out of my mouth. He approached me and asked me if the songs I was singing were mine. I said they were. A big smile was painted across his face, and he told me he just finished recording Plan B's latest record, which turned out to be The Defamation of Strickland Banks, one of my favourite albums of all time.
Harken back a little bit there to Fire in the Booth. Don't forget Plan B, that's what made me. I want to go back a second to the people in the ME support group, and that there were professionals in there, whether it be lawyers, doctors, athletes, all stripes of people, and it doesn't matter what your education level is, what your economic status is. If you are just unfortunate enough to end up with whatever happened along the way in your life that led you to getting ME or CFS or whatever autoimmune disease that caused similar symptoms, man, there's no prejudice. It takes a hold of you and it destroys who you were. It doesn't care what you did for a living. It doesn't care what your education level was. It doesn't care if you can buy the moon. It's just unforgiving. And the fact that we don't have the best knowledge and still a full armamentarium of tools to battle against this is a bit frustrating, because it just feels like needless suffering. It seems so like it's such an easy thing to fix. Like I'm just so tired. I'm just so, this and that. And that. So it's like, can't you just give me a shot of B12 and fix me? I mean, can you shoot me up with some adrenaline? I mean, something. Can you do something and fix me? It seems pretty easy. It's just unrelenting fatigue, right? But it's just not that easy, and it's a frustrating situation. And so now he's talking about getting into busking. Good for him. So glad he didn't give up on that. Let's go, Ren. Let's see what happens with this with our musician guy. Yeah, go.
He was looking for a new project to sink his teeth into, and he asked me if I'd come to London to record. We got into it. The whole time I felt dreadful, but this was a lifelong dream materialising in front of my eyes. So bit by bit, when I could, I'd get the train to London and start chipping away at my first ever album. I didn't really let on how I was feeling during this time because I didn't want to sabotage it. There would be times I'd finish up in the vocal booth after doing the take, excuse myself to go to the toilet, throw up from the dizziness I was experiencing, sometimes with specks of blood, and then I'd go back and pretend that nothing had happened. I'd be sitting around with the whole room spinning and would pretend I was fine. There was only so long that I was able to keep this up. Eric told me it'd be a cool idea for me to start going to industry showcases and start building buzz. Performing live like this was a whole new level of taxing that I wasn't ready for, but I was so ferociously ambitious that I just ploughed through. The usual way it would go is I'd be in the back of Charlie's car, the whole world would be spinning, I'd be trying my best to sleep in it all day, parked up outside of whatever venue or pub it was in London, trying to conserve energy for the show. Sometimes I'd cry a little before I performed. My whole body would be burning. Then I'd brush it off and I'd get on stage and I'd perform as best I could. People would come up to me at the end, pat me on the back. I'd smile and pretend to be charismatic. Then I'd get back in the car and I wish I was in bed and have to endure a 3-hour drive back to Bath from London.
Okay, we're getting into, trying to do some performing on stage, creating some buzz around our music, and having to endure a train ride to London, having to endure the energy that it takes to be on stage. He describes his body as burning, having to go take a break during recording and go puke, sometimes puking out blood, going back and try to act like everything's fine. Just a second. Okay, drop my pencil. Going back and trying to act like everything was fine, and And then after a live show, then getting in his buddy Charlie, which I think was from Trick the Fox, right? Having to endure a 3-hour car ride home. Let me tell you something. For those who don't deal with any kind of chronic illnesses or any kind of medical things, a 3-hour car ride is both physically and mentally challenging. It's draining. It is something that you plan ahead, days ahead. You have to rest up for a 3-hour car ride. You have to mentally prepare for a 3-hour car ride. After you get to wherever you're going in that car ride, then you have to recover from that 3-hour car ride. It's something that people who don't have any kind of chronic condition, I don't think you can really wrap your brain around it. I think it's a really hard concept to understand, well, it's just a 3-hour car ride. No, it really isn't just a 3-hour car ride. I mean, that's a undertaking, and it's an undertaking that you really have to weigh the pros and cons of. And it's such a simple thing. You're just getting in a car. You're not even driving. You may be the passenger in the back seat. You may be able to lay down in the back seat of the car. But it's just an exhausting thing. And it's, like I said, it's a difficult thing for people to wrap their brains around. And again, as you guys know, I hate making this stuff about me, but this is one of the reasons why Chris and I, we full-time RV. We have a Class C motorhome where he can drive, and if I need to, I can go lay down in bed. My bed's right back there, and I'm sitting in our dinette. Our recliners in our living room are just right on the other side of the camera, and then there's the truck, the cab of the truck with the driver's seat is just right there. So we choose to travel that way so that it's the easiest thing for me when we are basically going halfway across the country, going from Missouri to Arizona. And I think, and it's just a really difficult concept for people to understand how hard that is on anyone who has a medical condition. It really is something you have to prepare yourself for. I mean, I have to also increase my steroid dose so that I can be prepared to just to sit. I don't even drive. I just sit. And it just is exhausting. So anyway, all right, enough about that. Let's move on.
There was only a few shows where I could keep pretending. I'd usually be trying to disguise the fact that my body was trembling through the fatigue and pain. Eventually I started crying mid-set. It became blindingly obvious to everyone working with me during that time that something was very wrong. I told Eric that I needed to take some time out. My plan was to live at home with my mum for a month maximum, get my energy back, and come and finish the record. That 1 month turned into 2 months, turned into 3 months, turned into 6 months. I'd pushed myself to total burnout. The distance led to me and that angel breaking up, in part because it was difficult to navigate a relationship when you have so much brain fog, and I didn't know what it was well enough to be able to explain it to her at the time. With a loud thud, I'd been jolted out of a Shakespearean storyline. I lost the record deal, and I couldn't get out of bed. My friends from Trick the Fox never...
So a point of clarification I believe that we can make here is that he said he lost the record deal, and when in a later interview he went into more explanation of that, and what he basically meant by saying that was that he realized he could not continue to meet the obligations of such a contract deal, and that he had to not renew the contract. He finished out what his obligations were, and then he did not continue down that path. That's when he became an independent artist, so that he could work at his own pace and he didn't have somebody telling him what to do. And so I just wanted to interject that. And I don't recall, I think he had mentioned it in one of his either Discord or Twitch live sessions that he did, and then also I think he might have mentioned it during his Zach Sang interview. I'm not sure, but he's addressed that a couple of times. He didn't lose the contract, and I just wanted to, for anyone who's watching this video who isn't really familiar with REN, I wanted to just kind of make that clarification, even though I don't want to speak for him. I don't want to speak for him. I may be wrong, but
It was well enough to be able to explain it to her at the time. With a loud thud, I'd been jolted out of a Shakespearean storyline. I lost the record deal and I couldn't get out of bed. My friends from Trick the Fox never really called to check up on me. It felt like the whole world was moving at lightning speed without me. I had this amazing opportunity right in front of me and I was chained to the floor. I was alone, I was sick. I wished that my condition would get it over with and kill me, but it wouldn't, and it felt cruel that it wouldn't. It just let me rot in bed. The whole world would continue to turn and I would rot. In the next episode, I'm going to tell you about a fight with a television and losing my anal virginity to an 80-year-old man. Stay tuned for that.
well, doesn't he paint a pretty picture for the next? It just makes me want to jump right into it. Like, okay. All right, so I want to comment just a couple more things on the end of that video. Hopefully his relationship with his Trick the Fox buddies turns out to be mended, but that feels like a young person's reaction to someone who they know that has something that they don't understand. They have the inability to understand what he was going through, and that feels like to me that it was just they couldn't wrap their brains around what he was going through. And like I said, hopefully those fences have been mended and those relationships are okay. But you go into something that should be so exciting in your life. You know, he's got a record label who's interested in him. He's making music. He's doing some live sets to create buzz around the music. And his body is just saying, nope, not today, man. Not happening. And so then he was wise enough to try to manage his own pace and let that record deal go and not renew that, so that then he could continue at his own pace but still create. And I think that was very smart for him to do. And he's very wise beyond his years for how young he was when this was all happening. So good for him on that. And we love our sick boy. And these chapters he just lays it all out there, doesn't he? I mean, he just lets us know what he was going through, even though sometimes we're still not going to be able to understand what it was that he dealt with. I think we're going to have some music at the end of this, so I'm going to let that play out to the end. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys in chapter 4. Stay tuned though right now for the video, for the music. Go.
Patterns are composed by a time bomb for an author, like pigs to the slaughter. A symphony of self-doubt sings out, breath starts getting shorter. Running water is the state that I wish to become. Instead, concrete envelops my movement and I'm rendered deaf and dumb, unable to heed the advice of others. Don't tell me things will get better, cause so far things haven't gotten better. I've got the sweater, poster child, bipolar, ADHD, therapist, wet dream. I don't want to talk about my father, I don't want to talk about my dead friend, I don't want to talk about myself. I'm sick of talking about myself. I'm sick of talking about myself and realizing that talking about myself never ever helps. Still, I call for help, cause I really want help. But the pills didn't seem to help, and the therapist didn't seem to help. But still, I want help. I've danced with the devil in hell, I've sat in a prisonless cell, and here I always dwell, in this prison in myself. I do this thing where my mind travels back to the golden age. You know those times where you were carefree and everything was golden? The golden age. You know those times where everything was golden, where you were carefree and everything was golden? The hardest thing I ever had to do was come to terms with the fact that time never really existed. I've always felt so fucking detached and broken, bruised and mismatched. Find it hard to relax, living under the cracks. Tried to fill in the gaps, lying here on my back. Still, I can't find it. Sense of peace in my mind declined it. Pulse increase and my sweat combines with a feeling so deep I fall inside it. Depression, I hate you, depression. Your constant oppression, respond with aggression. They say depression brings you lessons. Constant stressing conceals blessings. You will grow in broken settings. Fuck those lessons, fuck depression. I've been living in your shadow for so long that I forgot how I can shine. How I can find a refuge in my mind. How am I meant to sit here and unwind? The planets align. I feel like I'm cursed. Feel like I'm cursed to just be here to hurt. Feel like I'm cursed to just be here to bleed with my demons. Been feeling this way since birth. Depression, I hate you. 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 Depression, I hate you.